Hi, my name's Stephen Kirsting, and this time on Your Shot My Way, we're going to be looking at a candid portrait taken by Melissa, and we're going to start this time with the import process. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the import dialog, and I'll use Shift-Command-I to open that up, and we're going to select the source. It's in the downloads. We'll pick the correct image. The first thing I do is select copy. Now I import directly into Lightroom. A lot of people might import onto the desktop first. Whatever works for you, I go straight into Lightroom. I select build previews 1-to-1, insert my copyright metadata, then make sure it's going to the correct location in Lightroom and just select import. Now if we look at the metadata, we can see my copyright information has been embedded into the image automatically, and that's a pretty big deal. So you want to do that. And I do not delete the images off of the card until after I have a good backup of this image if I want to keep it. The card is now my backup. Right, we're going to take a closer look at this image. We'll go to Develop Module. And first thing is the image is very loose, needs cropped, and it's very underexposed. And that is going to be primarily due to the metering mode. Obviously a matrix or area metering was used, and it was fooled by the background here, and including the background in the composition made that worse. If we had composed this image tighter, then that would not have contributed and the metering would not have been fooled as badly. Or we could have spot metered, center weighted metered, and that would not have taken that area into consideration. It would have blown out, but we don't care because we're going to crop it out. Now, obviously, if you know you're going to crop it this hard, it's going to be much better to compose this image much tighter, because we're really just throwing away information. And when it comes to printing, it comes down to how much physical size you start with, the size of the sensor or the size of the sensor left after cropping, in relation to how far you're going to stretch it, how big a print you're going to make. So the bigger you start with is always going to result in a better quality print or display. So by composing it this loosely, we've caused metering issues, combined that due to metering method, and we're really just throwing a lot of information away and limiting our ability to print and display this image at optimal quality later. All right, we're going to go ahead and crop, and flip that. I'll pick a little tighter aspect because there's just a lot of clutter. Something around here. Right around there. Looks pretty good. And this is what we've got to start with. Pretty centered composition. Try not to make it too tight. We'll go with that. Alright, we've got a little bit of blown out here. We've got a lot of underexposure. Now in this situation, if we had exposed correctly for the face, this part here would have clipped pretty hard. So this might be a good candidate for using flash. Now, even on-camera flash would help this image. And to keep on-camera flash from being overly harsh and obtrusive, the key is to turn it down and use it for just a little bit of fill. So like for this image, I'm guessing about a -2 flash exposure compensation would have added just a little fill, brought the shadows up, filled in the creases a bit, lit up the eyes, and given us a much better starting point. So, you know, on-camera flash is not ideal, but if it's what you've got, use it if it's going to help you. So in this case, I would have used even the pop-up flash at about a -2 to help out. But we didn't do that either, so this is where we're going to start. Right, first thing we're going to do, I'm going to deal with the highlights in the background. I'm going to bring up the shadows. I'm going to set the white point. Well, just shift double click on the whites, let it auto set white and black points. And looking at this point, still a bit underexposed. Looks like I've still got room back here, so I'm going to bring up the exposure just a bit. Right around here maybe. I'll leave clarity and vibrance saturation alone. Now because we're in the shadow, all our whites are blue. That's just a characteristic of shadows. And I could try to fix white balance, but Lightroom kind of stinks for that. So if I pick something that should be white, let me find a spot that should be white, click on that. Now everything is gone kind of yellowish, which, you know, if you like yellow, that's fine. Or I could pick something that should be truly white, like a highlight on the white headphones, gone a little further yellowish. Or I can pick something black, and we've gone back to bluish. So all of that rather doesn't work as well. So what I'm actually going to use, I prefer to use, is Photoshop. But in the meantime here, alright, that's what I want. Alright, so what I'm going to do is first I'm going to go down to calibration. And I'm in Adobe Standard. We could pick Portrait. See what that did? Excuse me. I prefer something a little bit more contrasty. I'm just going to leave it with Adobe Standard. I like that. We're going to deal with this blue tint down here. First, we could adjust our shadows if we wanted to. I'm going to leave that alone. We're going to take our blue saturation, blue primary, and turn that down. And I can adjust the tint as well. That really didn't make a difference. Right around there, so we've gotten it a little wider. It's still blue. We can go up here to hue, saturation, lightness. Now I could just say, okay, that's blue, and I could adjust blue, or I can use this tool and hover over it, and it says it's blue, but I pretty much promise you that if I hover over the color and then scroll up or down, it will adjust more than one color. You can see it's kind of adjusting purple and blue together. And I'm just bringing up the luminance to make it whiter. Alright, so you can see by using the picker tool and then scrolling up and down, it's going to select more colors for a more uniform adjustment. You don't get as much banding as you would if I just left purple where it was and used blue alone. It would result in a little more banding, probably. Alright, at this point we're down to some adjustment brushes and such. And let's look at what we've got. We've got some modeling of the skin, maybe a few imperfections we want to remove, and some basically exposure, dodge, burn stuff we're going to do. And I'm going to do most of this in Lightroom. Very basic. I'm just using the touchpad on my laptop. And so we're going to get an adjustment brush to start with, reset it, and let's start with a clone tool. And let's see where we want to adjust. A few little imperfections. We'll adjust this one. That looks good. We'll take that one. making sure we get skin textures and tones that are similar, and we'll fix this one. See how that all looks. We'll adjust this one up a little harder on the opacity. And that looks pretty good. You can take that as far as you want to. All right, zoom out a little bit. And we're going to go with some adjustment brushes. Let's see, we're going to do some brightening of the teeth, the eyes, the eye sockets. So we're going to use a slight increase on exposure. And just go, that's going to be too much, but we'll just go with that at the moment. Bring that down in size. And bring this area up. Here's the size of my brush. We'll bring up the teeth. That looks pretty reasonable, not too excessive. All right, and you can see we've got a bit of a yellowing here, so we can erase it from that location. And we'll deal with that separately here in a moment. All right, and we've got a bit of skin modeling here, there, and quite a bit of reddish tones. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a new brush. I'm going to pick a color. I'll click here and drag it out onto the skin to get a color. And then we're going to leave the exposure adjustment about 0.3 or so, something like that. I don't know. We can always refine it. And I'm going to set the flow relatively low. And we're going to work on fixing some of that color and bringing up the shadows at the same time. We're going to do that around the eye, around here, around the mouth. And a little bit on this side. All right. And that's not looking too bad. Let's take another brush. We're going to knock the background down quite a bit. Make this really large. Got auto mask on. Let's get rid of the color. Pick a 0 color there. Alright, and we're going to go with a 0 exposure, highlight recovery, low clarity, and I'm going to make this brush as big as I can. Auto masking is on. I'm just going to click right here and it will auto mask the image. Let's see what it did. What it selected actually didn't select much. Set the flow higher. Let's see where we got. All right, it didn't pick that much of an area. Got a little wider area now. All right, and doesn't look like we've gotten any on her face. Maybe a little bit, yep, a little bit right there. So we'll erase that right in this area. All right, and then I'm going to take another brush and instead of highlights this time, bring the exposure down just a bit. Make my brush smaller. Increase the feather. And we're going to knock down the background a bit. equalize this out a bit. All right, and let's see where we're at. So we started here, and we're here at this point. All right, still a little bit red magenta in this area. We could try to work on that. Pick the luminance slider. Oh, I've still got a brush selected. This says reds. We'll bring the luminance up on it. It usually works better than reducing saturation. That just turns things gray. We could check, see if we can pull a little bit of that out. And we could even adjust the hue. There's a little more yellower tint. All right. So from there to here, I think we'll add a bit of a vignette. So we'll pull this down. We'll increase the feather quite a bit. And reduce the midpoint. All right, and then I think what I normally would do for something like this is go over to Photoshop. When it comes to white balance, Photoshop is my choice. Use the levels tool. I'll zoom in here pretty large. Using the same kind of selections I did in, or attempted to do in Lightroom. I'll pick a white and a black using the appropriate droppers. And then we can adjust our gamma. Let's see what that did overall. I generally want my about 245 on whites, somewhere in there. So it went from a pretty flat, and you can see it had a kind of a bluish tint to it out of a Lightroom, and now it's a little brighter, whiter. And if that's too bright, we can always adjust that with masking. And I've got my flow set down to 10%. Set a very soft brush. We can just knock some of that down. But you notice it's turning it bluish, which I don't really like. Just undo that. And we can just use a curves layer. We'll pull down the higher area a little bit. That routine just a little bit of the highlights a little better. That definitely made the image pop a lot better. And we could do, technique I use is I will duplicate the layer. I'll turn this one into multiply. Turn the top one to screen. And adjust the opacities. And we can mask them selectively. Let's see. I'm going to group these. Command group. So it just increased the contrast a little bit. Made a little more pop. And I'm going to leave it like that. So close out of here. Select save when it says to. So we have our finished image, as about as far as I would take this image. We have the image in Lightroom. So we have before in Lightroom, after in Lightroom, and then out of Photoshop. Now we could of course probably gotten closer to that here in Lightroom. Now that we know what it should look like with Photoshop, or a better image, we can bring the tint up a bit. We can bring the contrast up a bit. Exposure up just a bit. And we will be pretty close. Perhaps maybe even preferable. Bring that exposure up a little bit more. And we could of course come over here, since we're still in a TIFF 16-bit, we could recover some of that highlight if we wanted to. Now one thing with these images, I'm very prone to over editing the first time. Right? So I've got all these adjustments I've done, and if they're all too much, or some of them are too much, I can't really go, I can go find the tool and adjust it, but an easier way is to duplicate this layer. I can even reset it. Just put our crop on it. This close. Not too critical. And then I can take these two images, my edits and the original, edit in Photoshop as layers. And then I could easily adjust the opacity. Let's go ahead and go with, let it align it for me, just make my life easier. Then I can adjust my opacity and tone those down, or selectively mask them in or out to take all of the edits and adjust them at once. Then of course I would have to crop it back down to the original aspect. So that's one way to, if you tend to over edit, to take them all your edits in Lightroom and tone them down as a whole. Because after you come back to this image, you might decide that it was a bit too much. Just tuck this in where it was, about like that. And we have another version. So tone down, original, Lightroom edits, Photoshop edits, Photoshop edits, tone down. Alright, so there you have it. A quick edit of a candid portrait to bring it up out of the shadows and kind of highlight the face. And it's about as well as we're going to do considering where we started at. So I hope this helps, and until next time when I see you again, have a great day.